I think that, he made certain promises to the public in order to regain his position. It's more of like a trophy thing, to be frank, because in the end, is he really keeping his word about anything else that he said? I don't see it. In fact, I went to the pharmacy yesterday because I have an allergy, and I'm friendly with everybody in my neighborhood that the vendors, and the price had gone up. From I had an allergy 2 years ago, and then I have an allergy now, and I said to the woman, "Are you sure that's the price I have to pay for this?" And she said, "Well, Donald Trump says," and this is the pharmacist, the head pharmacist at my pharmacy. "Donald Trump said he's going to lower the cost, but everybody, not just you, but also me, he hasn't done it." So I'm thinking, okay, people are at least opening their eyes and they're paying attention to what promises are kept, what promises are not kept. And this thing with Andrew, we already know what the system does. The system will leave one of their own behind. We saw that they left, let's say, J.E. behind. He is no longer with us, allegedly. We know that they left Craig Spence behind. Even his Wikipedia page will show that he was connected to the three-letter agency in the United States that begins with the letter I. His partner, however, Larry King, was not to be touched. He was put in jail for a financial crime, so he was not to be touched. Jean-Luc Brunel was allowed to be removed from the scene. Ghislaine Maxwell has royal blood on her maternal side. She will be released in due time. However, even in the royal family, we see that Andrew has been too tarnished, so he's dispensable. He won't be, let's say, unalived or anything like that. However, King Charles and his successor, his son, they didn't want anything to do with Andrew. Easter came and there was a meeting with the family, and Andrew is really somebody that they're ready to just be rid of. That, nobody really wants to hear any more about this. Now, it's put him back in the news, and it's very sensational because it's a prince, it's the royal family. But you have had a very important guest on your show, Kevin Annett, who shared with the public, much to my surprise, because I'd heard about it for many years, what happened in 1963-64 when the Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went to Canada and 10 children disappeared, and then the witness was no longer to be breathing. So this goes back. This is not a new thing. This goes back many generations, and there are many parts to this that I'm happy to explore here with you today.
Thanks. And let me just tell the viewers that Kevin Annett is back for part 4 on his series about the Satanic Vatican on Saturday at 8 p.m. And he's emailed me excited. He's got a huge announcement he's going to make for the first time. So if the video is released, what's Lady Victoria Hervey going to do at that point, Kirby?
Well, I'd love to know. She likes the spotlight. It's pretty clear. I think, if anything, I know she's listening to us because she listens to everything that you and I do, and wherever anyone is talking about it, and I think you and I have been the most vocal. Victoria, get rid of the hair. That's no longer in style. It hasn't been in style for many decades. Don't show your age in that way. That's my tip to you. The second tip is get a real job, because I don't think Andrew's going to be able to keep paying you for trolling Virginia because she's no longer here, and you're going to be able to actually watch Andrew in action. So gear up for it.
So when I saw that story then about this video, I just thought, oh, this is just the media nonsense again, building something up. I best send this to Ryan Dawson and see what he says. And I thought he would say something similar back to me. But actually, he said, this is huge. Trump can fire his shot. and then threaten the rest of them to get in line. One video is all it would take. They'd all become scared, and Andrew is cooked. And if people are wondering why Ryan's not on to speak about this, Ryan is going blind, as we've said, if you've not caught up with the story. But you can catch him over on X at RYLiberty and send him some well wishes over there. I'll put a link to his X in the description box if people want to send him some well wishes over there. So Ryan's taking this quite seriously then, Kirby. What do you make of that?
Well, I love Ryan Dawson. I really admire him, and I think that what's going on with his eyesight is just very suspicious, because they will attack you if you are too outspoken. However, I would disagree with Ryan's confidence in any administration, whatever name he would have put in there for the administration that's, quote, going to embarrass them all. I know better. I was an ex-slave for 8 years. I was flown to Washington, D.C. I was flown to San Francisco. I was flown all over the country. I listened in on conversations that were happening around me. I know that Trump, just like with every one of them, is the part of the same, let's just call it, I have to call it a cabal. Can I call it a cabal?
The club, yeah, the cabal,
the club.
yeah.
Let's call it.
Yeah.
So, Virginia and I followed a survivor of the Franklin case, whose name I'm going to keep private because he has a lot of trolls, and he has a podcast, or he tries to have a podcast and he makes a lot of really interesting points. He says things like, if you're a real survivor, you don't get big numbers, right? So look at my thing. Elon Musk made my thing really disappear. With all of the real victims, we don't really get big numbers. We don't get a lot of followers. Our things are shadow banned, right? However, he makes a lot of really interesting points. He said something like, he got a warning once because he won't shut up, and his goal is to save children. That if you do not shut up, if you speak, you will be unalived. That's just going to happen to you. That he was told specifically in his case, well, they're going to put him in a psychiatric hospital, and then they're going to throw him out the window, and then they're going to call it a self-unalivement. And what that reminded me of was another woman who I believe you may have spoken with Juliet about, who also was very censored, by the way, and that is Rushlana, the model who was said to have jumped out of a window. Well, Rushlana was really beautiful. She was on Epstein's, oh, sorry, I don't know if I can even say that name, but
Fine,
J.E.'s Island, 2 years before her unalivement. She too was a model for Victoria's Secret. Now that's something that I would like to touch upon, the whole Les Wexner situation, because there are people like Nick Bryant, and some days I'm like, okay, I believe Nick. Other days I'm like, I don't believe Nick, because he's never mentioned MK Ultra. MK Ultra has a big thing to do with this, as you probably will hear from J.E.'s niece, and as I have been saying for many years. And also he tends to believe, now he could be just like Ryan, innocently believing that some people are innocent, and he believes that Leslie Wexner is, quote, innocent. So I have trouble with people unless it's just, they're giving people the benefit of the doubt. So that's why we're all separate and doing our own thing, because the people on the outside, the investigators like Ryan and, Nick, they're doing their investigation from the outside in. I'm doing my investigation from the inside out. And I came into this because I knew things about Wexner through previous things, before I ever even met Virginia. However, with Rushlana was one of J.E.'s quote girls. And in 2006, she flew to his island. And she was already 18, but she was just incredibly beautiful. She's one of these women from Russia. So I can only imagine that she was probably very likely a Jean-Luc Brunel find. Okay. She was known for her hair. Her mother never touched her hair, so she was like Rapunzel. She was a gorgeous girl with just very long, beautiful hair. Well, on and she had been like on Vogue. She had even done work for Nina Ricci and Vera Wang, but her death became very controversial because on June 28th of 2008, she finds herself, well, wait a minute, because I've got my notes here.
Yep, take your time, check your notes. And while Kirby's checking the notes, viewers, don't forget, all of Kirby's links are in the description box. Please subscribe to the channel, check out the Substack with the banned content.
No, I was right. So, at around, and frankly, the same month that J.E. Turned himself in, which is June of 2008. So around so she lived in Manhattan, where I live. So around 2:30 in the afternoon, she unalived herself after, quote, falling from the 9th floor balcony of her apartment at 130 Water Street. So that's down in the financial district of New York. Now, police said, and the police, by the way, I want to just say that it was the police captain of J.E.'s neighborhood who found me for a 6-figure amount that he was paid for my abuser, so that the police are in on it. We also know that from the Franklin case because the police were in on it as well. Robert Wadman. Okay. So the police said that there was no sign of a struggle in her apartment and concluded that Roshana's unalivement was an apparent self-harm. However, one of her friends said that she had just returned from a modeling job in Paris and that she was on top of the world with no reason why she would do this. She planned to celebrate her birthday in Pennsylvania. She was making birthday plans, just like Virginia was making plans to renovate her house. So why would these women who were planning Rushlana to celebrate her 21st birthday, Virginia, who's making plans to renovate her house, she hires this attorney for her ongoing divorce. Okay, so when I hear then that there are tapes of Andrew that are going to come to the surface, and then yesterday's new news, as per Legacy Media, states that, oh, Virginia was very worried about her lawsuit with Rena O. No, she wasn't, because she had battled bigger problems before, and that lawsuit is many years old. Now, Rena is another, and people initially, they, the term as slave is sort of like a new term for people to wrap their minds around. So Rena initially said to the media, I was J.E.'s girlfriend. Because who knows that they are being used and abused and that it's actually a government project? Who knows that when you're entrapped? But Virginia, in her diary, in her memoir, which became part of the court record, she wrote about the fact that she had met Rena and that she was into S&M, allegedly, as per Virginia's diary. And then one of the women found her, because the way it works is the women and the children, the young children, are taught to go find others to bring them into this club. And so one of the women tracked down Rena, discovered where she was, and brought her into the fold as the person who had, quote, recruited her. But, Virginia had been taught to recruit. That is the way they work. So then what's interesting is that her husband worked for Michael Jackson. We know about the allegations with Michael Jackson. So what are the odds that all of these are not just, part of the same tree branch or tree trunk? Because we have Michael Jackson, who was unalived himself. He was made expendable because he's worth more now than he was even when he was alive. So returning to Ruslana, her former boyfriend said that he dropped her off at the apartment just a couple of hours before she was supposed to have suicided herself. That they watched Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore in the film Ghost together. That it's like, okay, they sat in her apartment, they were watching the movie Ghost, he leaves, and then, but she too was very upset about some of the postings on social media site. They were doing something to her. So that is called psychological psyop. Like Colonel Michael Aquino was involved for the military in the United States government in psychological training. And what you do is, as was J. Stanley Pottinger, now that we are aware of who he is, as was, who became Virginia's attorney, in addition to becoming the attorney for some of the other ladies, as was David Boies. So she was very upset over some of the stuff that was being left in 2008 on her social media site. However, because she had never cut her hair, now she lived in a building that had a doorman. When you're very pretty, people notice you. That's just the way it is. There are always watchers. They don't know that you've already been ensnared, right? So I remember one time walking into an apartment building where I lived. And as I'm walking into the building, the superintendent grabbed me, literally just grabbed my arm and said, "Hey, I want you to meet." So the owner of the building is actually a friend of this group. Yeah, it's just they bury their dirty money into real estate. So anyway, Ruslana's doorman, of course he's going to notice her. She's beautiful. But what he noticed is that the woman so she was found very far away from the building, even though she's supposed to have jumped. Well, she would have been thrown. She landed like over a block away, just in the middle of the street. Oh, yeah. But the doorman noticed that her hair was no longer long the way it had been. That somebody, apparently now they're saying that she chopped her hair off after she watched the movie with her boyfriend, and then decided she's going to jump out the window after destroying her hair, which was her signature trademark. So I mean, the situation with Ruslana, and frankly another woman that I'm happy to talk about that was also ensnared, Karen Mulder, another Victoria's Secret model who was gifted to Prince Albert of Monaco. I mean, this is just the same thing time and time and time again. So do I feel like initially I felt, okay, it's possible that Virginia was so overcome, because the other thing that this survivor of the Franklin case that both Virginia and I were following on YouTube and on X, which was then Twitter, he makes a lot of really interesting observations. And I thought it was interesting that she was following him and understood how this worked, because he does expose the MK Ultra aspect of it, because in his case, he's generational. And I mean, I wish that I could say his name so that everyone could follow him, because he really has really great insight. But even he said about Virginia, look, if they did not physically do it, they did it anyway. It was with all the stuff that was piled on top of her. Plus, he does make it a point to say she worked at Mar-a-Lago for Donald Trump. She was recruited at Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump is. He's another one that's like me. He doesn't believe in any political hero, no political party. He understands because we've been in it. We know these men. We know how the system works. That's why Alexandra Acosta got a raise. Even the judge who presided over Ghislaine Maxwell's trial in November of 2002, I believe, or 2003, I don't remember, 2022, 2023, in November, Allison Nathan. Well, what did then President Joe Biden do? He gave her another position to sit on the Second Circuit of Appeals. So she stopped Ghislaine's trial for 3 days to go get her promotion, which is why during that trial there was a woman on the stand, one of the 4 women on the stand, and I talk about this on my Substack, who was gifted to Donald Trump. But did the prosecution discuss that? No. They kept it very narrow focus, which is what is being done with traditional media. Very narrow focus. But this is not the first time this has happened. Now I'm thinking, okay, well, he says that even if they didn't send somebody in there to unalive her, that everything they put on top of her, because they have her in the court system, that is one of the points that he makes. The court system is very corrupt. As I just told you, Allison Nathan was given a promotion during the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, where it did not come out that she had provided Donald Trump, and frankly others, with a woman, with a girl. So, like, that was a sham trial. I mean, don't you think some of this just sounds unusual, that in the middle of a trial, she just runs off to Washington to get her pat on the back, just like Alex Acosta?
Totally. All those enablers get promotions and the survivors go to prison. And that was one of the horrifying things about the Franklin scandal. And I learned quite a lot from Nick Bryant about that. That the investigator and his son died in a plane crash. That was mind-blowing. But you have raised a lot of points there, Kirby. You raised so many questions in my head. I'm trying to recap them all now. So you mentioned a girl who was gifted to Prince Albert. You said that she had an untimely demise.
Karen Mulder, and I can talk about her if you want.
Yes, please. What happened to her?
Well, let me just pull up my Karen thing.
Yeah, go for it. I'll talk to the viewers. All of Kirby's links are in the description box, folks. We've got our podcast with Juliet Bryant coming next week, who was with JE for almost 2 years, talking about Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, some really fascinating information. So please look out for that one.
So Karen Mulder, also very beautiful. And she was discovered by Elite Model Management. Elite Model Management was founded by John Casablancas, who was a very close friend of Donald Trump. Casablancas was known to like very young girls. In fact, he married Stephanie Seymour at 15. She was 15 years old. So Gerard Marie had become the president of Elite, and he had been accused by many models, including Carrie Otis, if we remember Carrie Otis, of the R word. This was part of that 2020 investigation of Jean-Luc Brunel, where the young girls were being said that they were forced to have inappropriate relations with the guests, and where they claimed that Jean-Luc Brunel and others supplied them with white and then R-worded them. Well, Adnan Khashoggi would use Elite, and we've heard Adnan Khashoggi is connected to not just JE, but to the Iran-Contra affair, okay, which is in the United States and other countries. But he's one of the many men to whom these models that were working for Elite was how he got them to go on his yacht, because we know that Donald Trump eventually ended up with Adnan Khashoggi's yacht, that he changed the name. You see how these guys are all connected, and somehow people just don't seem to see the thread. The way that Khashoggi would get these girls, and he would, just like Victoria's Secret, uh, Elite had a catalog. Now, the catalog is supposed to only be sent to prospective clients, meaning if you have like a modeling firm, if you are Chanel, let's say, and you're going to hire them to work in a show. But that's not really how they're used. They're used so from this so-called modeling catalog, which is how Leslie Wexner also used his so-called modeling catalog, it would be sent to Adnan Khashoggi with the new girls as well. And Khashoggi would browse through their portfolios, and then his assistant would ask him, well, who do you want? And he would select anywhere from 30 to 50 girls to be on the yacht to compromise people that he wanted to do business with. However, the meat fee, the back when he was doing this in the 1980s, the fee by the agency to send out the girls, so they were in fact transportationing them, if that's even a word. The fee was anywhere from $35,000 to $50,000, depending on the beauty of the girl. Okay, and these girls would be sent. So Karen Mulder was she didn't think that she was beautiful, but she was. She had been entered into the elite contest by a friend, and then she was selected. Now, immediately, what they did to her was they put her onto the white and the brown because they wanted to just keep her working. So she ended up working for Valentino, Yves Saint Laurent, Versace, Giorgio Armani, and also Victoria's Secret. Now, what she's been described as a radiant blonde with sultriness, and she was described as somebody who could sell a paper bag. Okay, but the worlds of Karen Mulder, Ghislaine Maxwell, and J.E. had collided when she signed her very first modeling contract. She had tried in I'm trying to remember the date. I'm sure I have it here. She went on a television show. I believe it was in 2001 on a French television show. And she told a horrified host that she had been R-worded by top executives at Elite, as well as being given as a gift to Prince Albert of Monaco. She alleged that she had been coerced into having S to garner better contracts. So if you don't do as you are told, you don't get to be a high fashion model. So that should tell you a lot about somebody like Naomi Campbell, for example, who happened at the same time as Karen Mulder. So then that she went on to say that she had been used by Elite, and she claimed that other models were too, as slaves in a ring that, in her words, extended through the top echelons of French society, implicating politicians, members of the police, and other top officials. She also claimed that her own father had R-worded her when she was young. Now, she complained that her bosses got her addicted to white and brown, and then she said they tried to turn me into a PROS, blah, 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 because they thought it would be so easy. So what happened during the taping of the show? The doors were locked. Everybody was checked to see if they had anything from the show. It never aired. The master was destroyed. Now, once she got back into her apartment, her sister arrives. They like sisters because they can have the control. And then it becomes a multi-generational, because typically It's run by multi-generational families, such as the person that Virginia and I used to follow, who was part of the Franklin case. But when you are beautiful, they will pull you in, but they will use your sister or your family member in order to keep you in line. So her sister, after the show, goes to her apartment. She is then, because of her sister, taken into a psychiatric institution where she was kept for 5 months, heavily sedated, treated for, quote, depression and anxiety. She had neither. And of course, Gerald Marie, the head of Elite Paris and one of the men she accused of R-wording her, paid her bill. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Her boyfriend at the time was a man by the name of Jean-Yves Le Fur. I'm going to spell that name for everyone. JeanYvesLefur. Well, whose black book is he in? He is in J.E.'s black book. And then, of course, traditional media did the same thing with Karen Mulder as they did with Virginia and anyone else who has stepped forward. They wrote, troubled Dutch supermodel Karen Mulder is in a coma after she OD'd on sleeping pills Monday in an apparent attempt to take her own life. The blonde beauty who drew snickers last year when she claimed to have been R-worded by everyone from Prince Albert of Monaco to members of her own entourage was rushed to the American hospital after her former fiancé, Jean Le Fur, found her passed out on the floor of her Paris apartment. Doctors are still trying to revive her. Mulder's parents flew from the Netherlands to be by her side. Elite Models president Gerald Marie, an old friend of Mulder, who paid her bills when she was committed after her meltdown, they call it a meltdown instead of an expose, was shocked. He told Page 6, it's very sad. She had everything. I don't know how she lost it all. Mulder seemed on the road to recovery last summer when she embarked on a singing career, hitting the French charts with Gloria Gaynor. So in other words, they try to make it look clearly like we're seeing with the help of Victoria Harvey that these girls are crazy, but in fact, they've been trying to tell you the truth the whole time. However, in Karen's personal notes, in her handwriting, she wrote, Jean-Yves Le Fur is never short of publicity, so he was her handler. In that case, while I understand people are asking if Virginia's husband, who is known to have beaten her up, was her handler, we do know that it's very likely that this Le Fur guy, who is in J.E.'s black book, because it was J.E., after all, who signed her to Victoria's Secret. And Les Wexner said, oh, he had nothing to do with Victoria's Secret. That's not true.
I think we need to compile a list of all of the unalivements surrounding the J.E. case now, including Joseph Recurry, the Florida cop, Virginia, Jean-Luc Brunel. It's got to be getting close to 10 with all of these models.
It's more because we have the chef. Remember Chef Andy? It's before he was going to be interviewed for a deposition. He was gone. At one point, I was told 500 girls were completely missing. They can't find them either in jail or in, let's say, strip clubs or working somewhere. Here's another thing that another victim of the Franklin case said. And he said, well, they can change your entire background. So, for example, I won a beauty contest when I was very young. I am the only one that is not found at the Smithsonian magazine. My background has been so altered that there's no record of me in the Smithsonian for the contest that I won. It's every year except for my year. It's missing. My information has been so altered and they can do that. I mean, they have the power to change everything about you.
Sounds like one of the Black Mirror episodes me and Jen have been watching recently, where this tech genius lady alters people's realities and backgrounds. So, all right, we were talking about the unalivement list then. being over 10. And you also talked about judges who get promoted. But on that unalivement list, I've been meaning to ask you this for a long time, actually, Kirby, and I don't think I ever have. On the unalivement list, we've got the judge who, a gunman dressed as a FedEx delivery man, shot and unalived the son of U.S. District Judge Esther Salas and wounded her husband Sunday afternoon at their home. And that was the son of the judge overseeing the Deutsche Bank Epstein trial. What were your thoughts when that story broke 5 years ago now?
Well, there's something called the banker suicides. I do cover some of the banker suicides.
Let's say unalived.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, keep going.
I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase this.
Okay.
We know, for example, that J.P. Morgan was involved. We know that Deutsche was involved. Okay. However, what people do not realize is that they are part of this. I'm going to use Danny Casollero's term of this octopus. The banks are part of this octopus. And frankly, I am in the middle of writing how the family with the letter R, this banking family with the letter R, are about to ascend and take over the throne of, your country, sit on the throne of England. And I go back historically and I show how these banks came into existence, how they relate to one another. And of course, when a banker knows too much, that person is made to disappear. If a judge knows too much, like in the case of his last name was Woods, and Woody Harrelson's father, who was a trained CIA unaliver, did that job, and he also worked at the JFK situation. So if someone, whether be it a banker or a judge or someone who gets in the way, which is why Acosta did what he was told. He knows the score. If you don't do what you're told. So that, that's because that person was not doing what they were supposed to do, and that person had to be eliminated. Now, if you're not eliminated, you are given a promotion. But if you're going to actually tell the world, now, through the banks, the role of Leon Black is exposed if one studies it the way that I study it. The role of his father is exposed and why he was unalived. The role of how the U.S. takes over other countries, because it's not just our country we're talking about here. This is a very big thing. It crosses borders. It crosses party lines. This is a very evil, and it didn't just begin, let's say, after World War II, which is what a lot of other indie media people claim. This has been ongoing since the founding fathers, who came over from England and brought with them certain traditions. Now, and that's how I look at it, and that's how I write about it. In fact, Maria Farmer did say that she is a descendant of 2 founding fathers. So then the question becomes, was she selected because of her bloodline? And was Annie Farmer then propositioned to have J.E.'s child because of her bloodline? So this is a bloodline thing. And if someone steps out of line, because when you look at the unalivement of the bankers, they will show how Jess Staley was used in order to get some of the people in your government to do certain things to advance him, because he knew that he and then it would lead, let's say, for example, to how Glenn Dubin went from driving a taxi cab to now owning Jackie Kennedy Onassis's Park Avenue apartment and being one of the most wealthiest men in the world. And of course, he was paired off with J.E.'s so-called girlfriend of 8 to 9 years. I do not believe they were as much of a girlfriend boyfriend as J.E. was with Ghislaine, and how then she was given to Glenn Dubin. But Glenn Dubin is now a very powerful and very wealthy man. Well, that is then learned if you untangle the banking situation, at which point you will also see how the blackmail was conducted. So people who know too much and are not going with the program, they're eliminated in any manner. And that's a good manner. You know, send a UPS guy to your door and pew, pew, you're gone.
So you're saying this judge knew too much or was giving a decision that wasn't in the favor of the club?
Yeah, anyone who is removed is not doing what they're told. And they can be removed in several ways. They can be demoted, as in the case of the Promise Software. So the judge that ruled in favor of the Hamiltons, for example, in the Promise Software, Bill and Nancy Hamilton, who ruled in their favor and said, yes, the government did deceive you. And I am saying they owe you money. Well, that judge, not only was it overturned, like the case with the girls, with the JE victims, that case was overturned. The government decided, one judge decided, yeah, you guys were not told about the non-prosecution agreement. Well, what happened to that? It was overturned. With the Promise case, that judge was not only overturned, but he was demoted. He was removed from the bench, and in his place was a very friendly person who should have never been presiding over that case. That is how this system operates. And people have to open your eyes and don't look at what they want you to look at, because what they want you to look at is to distract you from a much larger, very large operation.
Yeah, well said. They've got to have complete control of the legal system to control everything else, basically. And if anyone plays up, then they just weaponize it with lawfare and put that person away. So earlier on, then you did touch on this other story that came out that Virginia was extremely distressed, and you've said this is BS. This is the Mail a couple of days ago about losing her multi-million-pound Prince Andrew payment 2 weeks before her unalivement. She was being sued by Rena O for falsely describing her as a girlfriend of J.E. and one of his recruiters. The £7.5 million lawsuit will now pass on to Virginia's estate following her death. Blah, blah, blah. The 41-year-old is believed to have received a fortune from Prince Andrew, paid her around $12 million. Sources close to Virginia reportedly said she feared losing her wealth in the weeks leading up to her death. And they also said she'd become depressed over the collapse of her marriage and losing her teenage kid to her husband. So, yeah, so they're basically just dogpiling on her now, aren't they, to feed this narrative of why she did it. End of story, no further investigation required.
And also, if you notice, they focus only on the money she got from, quote, Prince Andrew. She got money from J.E. multiple times. She got money from the compensation fund. She got money from the settlement from the banks. Okay, she got money from Ghislaine Maxwell. It wasn't just, and so she, you know what? She would never have lost that case because she wrote about it a long time before I saw it happen in real time. You know, how Rena and her went at it online on what's his name, Twitter, but it was happening. You know, even now today, I have people trying to fight with me, and I just block them because I know that they will try to embroil you into some drama so that they can get you into the court system. Once they get you into the court system, that's so we have to wonder. I wonder what's Rena's real role. You know, I have to wonder because if you're really a survivor, then you would want to help another person who was in the same shoes. You know, theoretically, you were both there. You were both doing things that you probably didn't want to do. One thing that I think people do not understand. Some people some of the women, I'm going to say, who did as they were told and didn't start bickering with each other, like let's say Virginia and Rena, they became well-known movie stars. They became very well-paid models, like we see Naomi Campbell, right? They became a part of, they started working for the World Bank. They became politicians. These people are embedded into our society, and they don't talk about the men who are embedded into our society who were in a position like that. So I have to go back to something that can be checked, and that would be what Paul Benassi said. And this can be checked by just pulling up his deposition, which is online on YouTube. You can find it. And one of his statements was, you know what? I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Can you just tell me what I just trying to say?
Yes, you was referencing Paul Bonassi's statement. You said people can find it online. And we were talking about...
yes, I got it. Yeah. So he said that he had been basically in this thing from the time he was a young boy, I think either 3 or 4 years old. And again, Michael Aquino was part of what was happening in his instance. And of course, Boys Town and all of that. And he was told that once he went through this, let's call it the system, once he was no longer of use, let's say, as a child being transported, he was going to be given a position in the government. So be made an ambassador. And then from being an ambassador, you know, just that he would first be told, go to the military, then be made an ambassador. Well, I want to take this back, and this is going to shock a lot of people. Shirley Temple, everybody knows who Shirley Temple is. Wasn't she made an ambassador? Shirley Temple Black. She was made an ambassador. I want